Good morning and welcome to Telework and Flexibility Initiative. My name is Kathy Ketcher. I am an eWorkPlace Minnesota partner, and I am grateful that you are able to join us on this call this morning and then this afternoon. I am joined by Eddie Caine. So Eddie Caine is coming to us from a warm and balmy Phoenix, Arizona. Eddie's been a trailblazing leader in the field of telework and remote work long before the energy crisis vaulted into, the front headlines. He is a nationally recognized and often quoted expert with more than 20 years of experience in Arizona, Texas, and on the national and international scenes when it comes to remote and telework. So back in 1990, Eddie began working with the state of Arizona's Regional Public Transportation Authority to develop and evaluate telework programs for more than 300 public, private, and nonprofit organizations. And the objective, of course, was for the Transportation Authority. They wanted to reduce traffic, but back then it was more about in getting clean air quality, improving air quality, reducing the carbon footprint, and all that good stuff. So now I always like to think that Minnesota's on the cutting edge, but this time, unfortunately, Arizona has us beat by over a decade with their telework initiative. But the one thing we can always say is at least we have the Mayo first. So there you go, Eddie. Um, Eddie's going to share with you stories from the field that he experienced during his work in changing the telework landscape in Arizona. So Eddie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me to talk to the group, which, by the way, we did a program here at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. Very successful program back in the 90s.
Nice.
As Kathy mentioned, we did in 1988 have an omnibus air quality piece of legislation that was pushing any employer in the Phoenix metro area that had 50 or more employees to develop measures that would reduce vehicle trips to their work site. If you know the Phoenix area, we have a grid system, but it's very spread out. It's over 500 square miles, and it's got professionals from all walks of life. So we looked at a lot of different opportunities, and our Arizona Department Energy Office at the state was very interested in doing a pilot program. We started a pilot with AT&T in the state, and we invited Jack Nilles in. And if you're not familiar with Jack, in 1974, he was the one who coined the phrase telecommute. And Jack came in as a retired NASA scientist and helped us develop a program that was highly successful. We used the lessons learned from that in 1990 through the 90s to help others kind of engage in the same type of success. So I'm going to go over some of the things. I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide. This is not by any stretch of the imagination all of the problems in developing a telework program. And I like to tell groups that there's probably as many issues as there are benefits to a telework program. The issues, though, are fairly easy to avoid by using some experience and some recommended practices that I'll go over some of them with you. But Kathy really has a great opportunity for employers in your region to help develop the programs in a very formalized method, and that's the key to what I'm going to be telling you today is formalizing programs. So I'm going to go over these quickly. The 5 things that came to mind when Kathy first asked me if I would share some of this information is, number 1, not being able to secure top management support for the program. One of the big mistakes people make. Number 2, taking too casual or too narrow of a view. Now, it's easy to say, well, and I got phone calls all the time, people saying, I just want to telework myself. Can you help me with what keys I need to do to go to my management and allow me the opportunity to work from home? When it's self-serving in nature, managers have a really difficult time in approving that type of an opportunity. Number 3, not preparing participants for the change. And there is a big change. We're going to go over that. But if you've ever been in a company that said, This is our current location, but next year at this time, we're going to be at this new address. You know some of the frustrations in moving an entire workforce. Think about moving half or a portion of that workforce and not having challenges, and that's what we'll go over. Not making adjustments to the program as it develops. Another problem that comes along with a lot of programs, and I've taken so many phone calls on, gosh, our program is so successful, and today we're really floundering. Can you help? And number 5, not measuring impacts of the program. So I've got examples of each of these, and I'm going to go over them. So let's get right into this. Okay.
Thanks, Eddie. Let me just say I want to welcome Peggy's just joined us as well, and I invite all of you. I know be on mute if you choose to, but also if you have questions as Eddie goes through this, or if there's something really specific that is applying to your organization, do feel free to jump in and ask questions. We want this to be as interactive as possible. Thanks, Eddie.
Absolutely. You bet. Okay. Number 1, I'm just going to go over some of these quickly. Have your CEO and primetime stakeholders participate in this process. You've got to get senior management involved, and it should be up front. And of course, the departments that make the most sense as key stakeholders are the human resources, IT and communications, facilities, risk management and legal, finance, and then if you have special departments that are going to be a part of the program directly, I would invite those people in as your task force or your original startup group. It's very important to get their buy-in and get them to sign off on many of the initial concepts that you want to develop. It's not a bad thing to have a pilot program even today. You know, we've tested this thing for more than 30 years. It does work, and it works very successfully, but calling it a demonstration, calling it a pilot is not a bad thing. Then give your participants and the committee all of the credit for the success of the program down the road. You're going to find that people will, if they're engaged and they help doing a part of this, they're going to be very much involved. Now, I've got an example up on the screen, America West. America West Airlines used to be based here in Arizona, and that program today, America West no longer exists, but the vacations portion of that program had a call center where people who would fly on their airlines were invited to come into the call center to find ways to go on vacation and great places to go, and how they connected the airlines with all of the other amenities when you wanted to go on your Caribbean trip. So that call center, of course, employed people just like many call centers do, and they were concerned primarily about other people in the call center being disgruntled about their not being given an opportunity to telework. So what they did is they set up 6-foot tables, and they set monitors on those 6-foot tables, and below the monitor it said Joanne or Michael or Phyllis, and it was what they were doing at their home office at the same time people in their commercial office were doing the same thing, which was talking to customers, setting up vacation packages, etc. And as people walked by and looked at those screens, they thought, wow, look how well these people are doing from home, and look how many vacation packages they're booking. And it gave everyone in the office a sense that this program is going to be a success. So that was a great way for them to help secure some of those in-house consent and appreciation for the program. Their long suit was helping people in the office, but they really fell short of helping senior management understand those same realities. My next screen is taking too casual or narrow of an approach. There's an old Chinese proverb that says calling things by the right name is the beginning of understanding, and oftentimes when I go into an employer's site, the first thing I'll ask them is, tell me the profile of the people who really would be well suited to this work environment. And getting managers to engage in this process is key. But what you want to do is find the differences in these different types of workers. We have, in any traditional workforce today with knowledge workers, we have a lot of different people doing a lot of different functions, and they don't all fit the same profile for telework. We used to call some day extenders, people who just wanted to pick up email and do reports in the evening. There was always an occasional teleworker that would every 6 months have a major report they had to develop, or on a quarterly basis or annually. So we would call them occasional teleworkers. There would be part-time teleworkers, maybe 2 times a week, 3 times a week, or maybe 1 day a week. There would be full-time telework. That would be a completely different scenario. And we did these, we set up these different functions and names so that we could help define the tools, the technology, the resources that would be required in doing the different types of functions. And it helped us at a level set for those. Of course, working from a traditional office could be, at some point in time, the exception. And it's become that for Carolyn Seckler, even a small department inside Motorola, where they decided that the first thing they were going to ask when an employee was hired wasn't where are we going to put them. The first question was going to say, what do they need to accomplish their job? What do we need for their work-related responsibilities? And it no longer was, we've got to find space because we're hiring a new employee. It was, we're going to find what they need.
See, Eddie, I have a quick question about that, because we're working with
Sure.
an organization right now who has given us we helped them draft their guidelines. They gave them back to us, and they said, if you are in position of a business analyst, you can request telework 1 day a week. If you are in a position of whatever, this role, it's a little bit higher up, you can have it 2 days a week. And they really put a lot of parameters around that. And I wondered what your thoughts were, based on your experience. I personally think it's not a good idea to really box it in that much. What do you think?
Companies do want to do that. They want to pigeonhole different job titles and the amount of time people can telework. And it's because they want to get their arms around it. And I understand they're wanting to do that, but everybody is individual. And what I have found is that employees should be making the case. If you roll this out in the way that I think is the best practice, is you basically define telework at your organization. You give them very specific information about the types of telework encouraged. You give them information about what tools they'll be given, the expectation of communication to their coworkers. You give them all of that up front, and then you help them self-select how much telework is going to work for them. And whether or not I'm a customer service analyst or whether I'm an IT professional, I wouldn't put those categories of how much telework is appropriate for you until you help self-select that. So if you come back to me and you say, I think I can do this full time, then as your supervisor, I would say, well, exactly how do you expect to do that? And let the employee define that back to the supervisor. And the supervisor can make those judgments. Okay, not preparing participants. This next slide. I mentioned if you moved to a new place, you know that it's difficult. And the encouragement here is you set policies, you set up the ergonomic checklist, the work plans, all those things in advance, and people can evaluate the possibilities of their participating and how much participation by themselves. You select a mix of qualified candidates, and this is where you, as a program champion for telework, can help stack the deck. Because in the beginning, if you're doing a demonstration project, you want volunteers, but you want to help those volunteers who are the most qualified candidates. And as those programs and those groups succeed, then you open it to others. You're always going to expect resistance. There's always going to be people who will have objections to what's going on, but you need to tackle each of those objections openly. Oftentimes, we like to encourage people through training to do some role playing. What AT&T did, and I thought it was very interesting, is before they ever sent a single person home, they would put a ribbon, just a crepe paper ribbon, across their doorway. And they said, okay, Today, we're pretending that you're going to be working from home. Anything that you need to do, like send a fax and the fax isn't in your office, or if you have to go to the bathroom, crawl under the ribbon, but we want you to pretend like the person down the hall is 20 miles away. So if they're there, we want you to call them. If there's a meeting that's an ad hoc meeting that comes up, we want you to participate over the phone. We want you to pretend like you're working from home today. And it was a neat experiment because AT&T found out that, wow, maybe I do need a fax at home. Maybe I do need these different technologies. Maybe I need to sharpen my skills on conference calls. So it was a great learning experience for them. And then, of course, if you come back and openly discuss at lunch and learns or whatever you want to call them, you'll learn a lot about your program. I went to BF Goodrich. They actually make the slides on airplanes that are emergency slides when your plane doesn't pull up to a, the standard gate at a terminal. And those, there were employees of that group that were technical writers. John was a technical writer inside the BF Goodrich program here, and he was one of the teleworkers that went home. Well, when John's boss came to the training, he sat with folded arms at the back of the room, couldn't make eye contact with me. I don't even know if he paid attention to a word I said through the entire manager training. But 6 months later, when I walked in the room to get a level set on where the program was, he was the first one that ran up to me with a big smile in his face, and he shook my hand and he said, "This stuff works like you can't believe." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, John went home to telework, and John's typical day in the office was a cup of coffee and then going around to everybody in every cubicle and asking them about the television show he saw last night and the kids' volleyball game and everything else." John was a real talker, but he was a great employee. I didn't want to fire him. But when I sent him home, John's productivity went out the ceiling because there was no one to talk to. And everyone in the office told him that my work and performance has gone up because John's no longer around. So it does take follow-up on these programs. You want to get people prepared for this type of work arrangement, but you also want to take advantage of some of these opportunities. Next, making necessary adjustments in the program. We know that the only thing that's absolute really is change. And to start a program with policies, training, setting up the procedures for the program, and then just letting it go can be a real mistake. When we started working with the federal government back in 2001, I was assigned work with both the Department of Energy and the Census Bureau, and we used to go out to all the different sites and help them develop their program. And at that time, there was a program, or there was an element of their program that was always nagging at the startup of each of the different departments, and that is middle managers were really reluctant to allow teleworking. It was one of those situations where eventually the Office of Personnel, or Office of Management and Budget, changed the DOA's responsibility and said, let's make this program, instead of a voluntary nature and open to everyone, let's make it mandatory, and let's make it mandatory to the end that if an employee feels that they may be well suited to telework, give them full information about the program and let them apply to their manager. And if their manager says no, they can grieve that up the chain, and the manager basically has to say this is the reason that that employee is not a good fit for telework. It opened a lot of dialogue up, and it's really provided a better opportunity for departments inside the federal government to manage a more aggressive program, and it's been very highly successful. You can go on to the federal department's websites and find out more information about that one. But middle managers do tend to resist. There's a real complacency that takes place, I think, when you can watch someone walk in the door in the morning, watch them go home at night, and see a level of activity around them. But that never, or doesn't always, translate into accomplishment. So it really forced managers to become better managers, and it does. and it makes us all, I think, a little more ag aggressive or assertive in reaching the organizational objectives and goals. Work is a very social environment. We know that. And it's highly self-reinforcing. And what I mean by that is if you have a workforce that has, let's say, 10 people who show up to the office every day, one of those employees works at home 2 days a week, you'll find that the conversation, the style of work, the social environment in that office really tends to gravitate toward a face-to-face working environment. If you have a workforce of 10 employees where 9 of those employees show up only 1 day a month into the office, you're going to find that that distributed work environment is highly dispersed, and meetings are held in a different way, communications are much different in their nature, and the whole office environment is dramatically different. The mix between those two will tend to lean toward the typical environment. So I hope that's clear. Offices tend to be social, and you have to really encourage a distributed workforce. You have to really encourage them to communicate at a different level when you work with people in and out of the office. And then there's always that incident where we worked very hard to select the ideal candidate for the job. We knew that their personal profile was ideal. We knew that their professional profile fit the job very well. And we thought this is the ideal candidate. But for some reason it didn't work out. And you always have to be ready for that type of what we considered failure at the time, but it's really not. You bring the people back into the office. We've had people say, well, you know what, I'm just going to send everybody home and get rid of this space. That doesn't always work. Even if you have everyone in the office that is well suited to telework, you can't always plan on everyone having an ideal home environment to make this work. And always be ready for Murphy's Law. Well, I'm at my last slide, and this is, of course, measuring the impacts of telework. And it goes back to that comment I made earlier about always having the ear of your CEO and top-level decision makers. Who gets measured and what gets measured is it is really the wide variety. In fact, if you've ever heard the 2 a.m. test, I don't know if you've heard that before, but people talk about the 2 a.m. test. Whatever your CEO wakes up in the middle of the night fretting over, concerned, whether it's recruiting the best employees or improving on a customer challenge, whatever that 2 a.m. test is, whatever that challenge is to that CEO, if you can find solutions in sending people home, and a good telework environment can do a lot of benefits, can provide a lot of benefits to an employer, then you can oftentimes say the justification for this program is exactly what you're concerned with. And believe me, a lot of CEOs will take advantage of programs that seem to meet a business challenge and the main business challenge they have. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. We had in the tallest building in the city of Phoenix, at that time it was called the Bank One building. Today it's Chase Bank, but it was Bank One, and we had a call center inside that bank that only took out inbound calls. That's correct, inbound calls. So they called us up and they said, well, we'd love to have this department experiment with telework. Can we do a demonstration? So I went in, I trained the teleworkers, I trained the managers, and we did have people who were not going to go home, so we did a training for non-teleworkers. And all of those people were very much up to speed when we sent the first teleworker home. Well, 2 years later, I get a call in the phone, and I've got a woman on the other line, on the other side, sobbing, and you can hear her distress over the phone, saying that we've developed our program. You know how successful it was. We did a 6-month evaluation, and today my new boss that came in last month is asking all of us to come back into the office. Well, they hired a new boss to manage that call center that never had experience with telework, and this is back in 1998. Well, in 98, because it was a challenge and because it was something that the manager had never done before, they were looking for evidence of success in the program. Well, after the first 6 months, they neglected to do any evaluation on the program in the future, so they had nothing that was current that showed how successful the program was. And we're suffering right now with the state of Arizona and a new governor and a new administration with a similar situation, in that Department of Administration called me about a month ago and said our new governor is cutting programs. They've made layoffs. They're very conservative, and they wanted to make sure that there's no waste at the state level in government. So they've been laying off, and they're looking at the telework program, and there's discussions about eliminating telework. I asked them first thing, what is the last time you've measured the impacts of telework? And they said, oh, we haven't done it for years because we've had the program 25 years and it's been highly successful. So my encouragement to any program that starts out is, because it's out of sight, out of mind, it's not a bad idea to, at different intervals in the program, take another level set on the program, take another look at it, see if there's successes that you need to gravitate toward.
Say, Eddie, we're at the top of our hour. We've just gone over 1 minute past 12, and I do have a question from Holly, and it's, what are your thoughts about requiring employees, oh, she just left, but other people might be interested in the answer, requiring employees to track their time while teleworking rather than their projects and completion?
There is a work plan that I recommend, even when employees are just starting out and they know that there are time constraints. But time is something that can help supervisors get a much higher comfort level with. And whatever it takes supervisors to feel more comfortable with their program, I encourage it. In fact, if they want to know step by step the things that you were doing in that telework day, I think it's fine for them to develop the work plan in advance, show it to the supervisor, let the supervisor sign off on it or change it, and then when they come back into the office, sit down with that supervisor and say, here's all the things I accomplished. Oh, and by the way, since I was able to finish all those, I also got this done.
That's awesome. Thank you, Eddie. And if you don't mind, I'll have you jump up to the next screen. I want to thank you for coming and sharing your time. And if anyone else on the call has questions, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. But before you head out, I do want to share with you information about eWorkplace and the free resources that are available to each and every one of you. If you want to go to the next slide, this is just a quick menu of services that are available. If you are in the throes of either revamping your flexibility and telework program or designing one from scratch, we can help you with the development of policies and the agreement development and what does it look like. We have lots of sample materials, case studies, and implementation toolkits. There's also available, and remember, this is all funded by our great state of Minnesota, so using these resources, brings value to everybody. We have free training available. It's online training for managers, and Eddie talked about how important that is. We can really lose traction in our telework and flexibility initiatives if we have people in the back of the room with their arms folded. We need to get the message out through training for both managers and employees as well, because as Eddie said, some people are left behind, and we want to address their feelings and thoughts and experience as well. And of course, as Eddie outlined, is the program evaluation, and not just 6 months from now or a year from now, but that ongoing program evaluation. We can work with you to identify existing programs in your organization that you can integrate this into. Maybe it can integrate into your performance management. Maybe it can integrate into your onboarding programs, but looking for places to integrate so it stays alive. So when a new leader steps in, like Eddie shared, or like we saw at Yahoo, or what we saw at Best Buy, the new leader comes in and pulls the plug, and telework and flexibility die without any good reason, especially programs that are successful in the past. So if you want to flip to the next slide, I'm just going to do a quick show and tell. You can go on to eWorkplace Minnesota. We have a fabulous commuter savings calculator that we really want anyone in your organization who is telecommuting today or starting tomorrow or whenever. They can fill out this evaluation, and on the next slide it gives you a snapshot. It shows not only what they're saving, but how we're saving the environment, how we're getting people off the road, how we're saving time, and how the organization is saving money. And on the next slide, I believe it shows that we even provide aggregate data. So when we did this program back in 2006, we had several thousand people go in and fill out the information, and the employers that participated were given really in-depth reports that shared with them how they were helping the community but helping themselves as well. And I think on the next slide, yeah, this is just some examples of employer reports. Next slide. And we include a little pulse check on how employees are feeling about the organization when they're participating in telework, giving you a little inside glance into how it is impacting their well-being, how is it impacting their loyalty and their productivity, and so on. And the next slide is, again, more nice pictures about how we have reports that are amazing and that we would love for you to take advantage of. And if you want more information on eWorkplace Minnesota, just Google eWorkPlaceMinnesota.org. Oh, there it is up there on the website too, or .com. But we understand we started 5 minutes late, so we've gone a little bit over it. We want to be so respectful of your time. But if anyone has any questions right now that they want to ask Eddie or ask about eWorkplace, feel free to jump in. So we have solved all the world's problems, Eddie. Well done. Virtual high five to you, my friend. And for all of you on the call, once again, we are grateful for your time and your attention, and we do look forward to talking with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.